Well, good afternoon to you. 306 now, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up, top of the hour, 4 o'clock, we'll be joined by Todd Bensman from the Center for Immigration Studies. We'll talk to him about why he believes Joe Biden may be bribing Mexico at this hour when it comes to the border crisis. Todd has the details ahead. Margot Cleveland joins us at 4:30 from the Federalist as we take a closer examination of Hunter Biden's painting selling scheme. And Mary Margaret Olahan is here at 5 o'clock from the Daily Signal. The March for Life going on today. Tens of thousands of people gathering in the nation's capital to march on behalf of keeping babies alive. And Mike McCormick is here at 5:30. He once was a stenographer for Joe Biden, an official one, not, like members of the press. And, well, he learned a lot, and now he's written a book about why that man deserves to be impeached. We'll talk to him about that. And you can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Yeah, we will talk to Todd Bensman at the top of the next hour about immigration. But I want to start on that issue right now because something amazing is happening in Eagle Pass, Texas, on a small 2.5-mile stretch of the border. You know now that Texas has decided to secure a small area, and the federal government is apoplectic about this. The Biden administration is furious that anyone is securing any mile of the border whatsoever. And for more on this, I want to bring in a witness to all of this, our guest, Allie Bradley. She's a Southwest correspondent for NewsNation, and she is reporting today from Shelby Park in Eagle Pass, Texas. Allie, great to have you with us. Thank you so much.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Give me, I've been following your social media, and by the way, people should follow you on Twitter to get a sense of this, but what is your sense today of the state of play down there on that 2.5-mile stretch of border?
We saw that DHS cease and desist letter, right, saying, hey, by the end of the day, Wednesday, you better let the feds have full access back into that park, or else we're going to bring this up to the Department of Justice. Well, Texas, instead of going, okay, we'll bend to your rules here, they're doubling down. They're literally putting out new concertina wires. They're putting up anti-climb barrier on top of the concertina or on top of the Connex boxes down here that have concertina wire all over it. I posted a video of that so you can see what I'm talking about, because people are climbing over the Connex boxes. 10 people this morning breached those Connex boxes before those anti-climb barriers and concertina wire were put on top, and they were actually arrested. So Texas DPS started arresting people for criminal trespass. This is not under that controversial SB 4 law where local law enforcement can arrest people for crossing illegally. That's not what this is. This is something Texas DPS has been doing for quite some time on ranches and other areas where people are trying to evade. So now they're because they took control of this park, they seized this land from the city, they can criminally arrest these people for criminal trespass who are crossing the river illegally. So that's what we're seeing happening. 10 people this morning were apprehended by Texas DPS. They're not being turned over to Border Patrol. They're going to jail. And then a couple hours ago, there was a male and female that were also arrested. So they're arresting single adult men and women right now. Doesn't matter what country. There's no, nothing, no requirements, if you will, or stipulations here. If you cross illegally into the state of Texas, there's a good chance that you're going to get arrested right now. So Border Patrol, they want to get back into the park, or I should say DHS wants to get back into the park. I will say this, Border Patrol has had access to the boat ramp here at Shelby Park since this closure. So they have been able to put their airboats in the water. They have been able to patrol. They have been able to remove their boats, but they just haven't had that access to that processing area under the bridges, and they haven't been able to receive migrants who are crossing here.
Can you give us some more detail on that? The Border Patrol, have they had access to the boat ramp for the entire duration of this saga?
That's what the Texas Military Department told me this morning, and that's when I talked to Texas DPS. They've said the same thing. So as far as I know, they have had access to this boat ramp.
Interesting. Well, that flies directly. I'm sorry. I just wanted to make a point, Allie, about that. That flies directly in the face of what the Biden administration's been claiming. They're claiming that they've been shut off from that park. According to Texas, what they're telling you, no, Border Patrol has had access to that boat ramp.
Yeah, and you can look on my Twitter right now. I posted a video of them putting a boat in the water this morning. So they absolutely have access to the area that they need to patrol the water. And we talked about those 3 migrants drowning, right? And there's this whole finger-pointing situation that happened. They're very reminiscent of Del Rio, kind of putting the cart before the horse before we had all the facts. And DHS and the Biden administration blaming Texas, saying that they physically barred Border Patrol agents from going in there and responding to that, those migrants in distress. But then we learned that Mexican officials confirmed those individuals had drowned an hour before Border Patrol even arrived on scene to respond to said migrants in distress. So a lot of moving parts there. But when it comes to the boats, again, that cease and desist letter, that came out and said that has to happen by Wednesday night, right? End of day Wednesday. But they had access last week. So it's very confusing as to what DHS even really wants down here. It seems to me that it's just kind of a show of force, if you will, like who's tougher right now, because they are able to come down here. And I've seen Border Patrol walking around in the park today. So they're just not receiving migrants and processing them here any longer. Yes. Now, they are walking in about 15 miles away in a little area called Normandy. That is still happening. It does seem like Texas is going to try to expand their kind of barriers a little bit further. So we'll see if that happens. That would probably be the next steps for Texas to expand kind of their Connex box barrier or their wall barrier that they're building in other areas. So we'll see what they do. But Texas isn't giving up. They're not letting down. They're not backing down. They're holding their ground. Governor Abbott has regularly said that they are stepping up in the federal government's absence, and we've heard them invoke, the Article 1 of the clauses there under the Constitution under the invasion, where Governor Abbott invoked that invasion a year ago. Well, now Ken Paxton doubled down on it and says we are protecting our border. We're within our rights within the Constitution to do so because the federal government is not here. So they're invoking those articles, and they're going full bore when it comes to securing their border. And I'm going to tell you what, I've been covering down in Eagle Pass for 2.5 years, and I've never seen it so fortified, so active. There are troopers, there are soldiers. I mean, it is crawling with Texas military and Texas DPS right now, and concertina wire as far as the eye can see. Like I said, they're doubling down. If anything, they are not pulling back like the administration seems to be wanting them to do.
This is one of the most encouraging accounts I've heard since January of 2021. That's a big deal. What is the mood like among Texas law enforcement and the Texas National Guard? How do they feel about their mission right now?
Well, right now, it seems like they are on board with what they need to be doing. They are appreciative that they are able to deter people from coming in. That's what they've been assigned to do under Operation Lone Star. Now, what's really interesting is when it comes to Border Patrol and local law enforcement down here on the ground, they're frustrated at the administration for causing kind of a rift between them on the ground here, because they're like, we don't have any problem here. Border Patrol that I talk to down here actually is supporting what these guys are doing. And so you have the federal government. That's why I kind of had to walk back and say DHS wants to get back into the park, because Border Patrol, the ones I have talked to, and I talked to a lot of them are very supportive of what's happening down here. Because as you know, a lot of them feel like they are the U.S. Welcome Patrol, and they'd rather be out patrolling the border, not receiving migrants. And so when they're down here under the bridge, sitting around receiving hundreds of migrants every day, yet Texas now is coming in and saying, no more, we're blocking this off, we're securing our border. Border Patrol is kind of giving them a little round of applause quietly in the corner.
I saw on your social media today that there are members of the Texas National Guard, Texas law enforcement who are prepared, if necessary, to be arrested by the federal government should it come to that. What are you hearing?
Yeah, that was pretty wild. So this morning I actually got a call from one of the local sheriffs here, a neighboring county, and he called me and he goes, hey, if you see any marshals down there, let me know. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, there's talk and there's a chance that they could come in there and arrest DPS and Texas National Guard for blocking the federal government from accessing that property. And I said, no way. And he said, that's absolutely a possibility. And then when I got down here and talked with some soldiers, they said the same thing. They said, if that's what happens, that's what happens, and we're prepared. But that's pretty much what we're being told could happen and could be the next steps that are taken if the government continues to push in that direction. So we'll see. But they're like, hey, we're doing the job. If they want to come arrest us for securing the border and for, following our orders, then that's their prerogative. But they said that they're prepared. And the sheriff said he stands shoulder to shoulder with them and he'll come bail them out.
Is it just my imagination, or is the federal government responding to this, the securing of 2.5 miles of border, with more aggression than they have the entire border crisis?
No, I mean, you're right. I think that that's an accurate statement to make because we haven't seen the federal government really come after Governor Abbott like this in any capacity. We haven't even, when they hardly went after the shipping containers in Arizona, right? So we have not seen them as active as we have right now. The other thing, too, is when it comes to the situation down here at the southern border and the drownings. I brought this up with another conversation I was just having with Director McCraw down here because he just came in on a helicopter here into Shelby Park with a small delegation of some Texas lawmakers. And we were talking about how, Eagle Pass is averaging a drowning a day. And then 3 migrants drown. And everything stops, right? And we're sitting here going, we've had hundreds. And the administration hasn't said one thing about the drownings at Eagle Pass. And all of a sudden, the whole world stops, and it's Texas's fault that these people drown. It's really, really wild to see this all unfolding right now. And Texas, the energy, it's a weird energy here. It's palpable. I can't describe it. I don't know if it's, I don't want to say, it's like a war zone down here. It's full militarized. They're ready for anything. They want to secure the border, and they're done messing around from what I've heard from them.
I don't know if other people share my mood, but as far as I am aware, my feeling about this is finally a sense of hope that something can change, because this has been just miserable. This is just with each passing day, we've had more miserable headlines on this subject, whether it's people dying trying to come into the country, Americans dying as a result of the open border, the chaos in all of our cities, the crime, people committing crimes who are illegal immigrants being released by sanctuary cities back into the community. At some point, you just become so, numb to all of it. You're like, of course, another awful headline. For the first time in a long time, I feel like there's something happening for once. So if I was down there, I'd almost feel a sense of optimism.
Well, I think that unfortunately that might be misplaced a little bit, because here's the thing. They're going to come in if it takes 1 to 4 months for most people to get here, right? And you think these people that are in Mexico are traversing through the Darien Gap are going, oh, Texas put up some concertina wire. We're right. Not going anymore. No, they're coming into Texas is securing Texas. They're not securing the nation. So you still have, the Tucson sector is surpassing the Del Rio sector and has been for months because Arizona's not doing anything. People are taking the path of least resistance right now, and Texas is resisting. So yes, people are still coming in through Texas, but not in the droves that they were. But they're going into San Diego and they're going into Arizona, right?
No, that's true.
That's a national issue. So Texas is doing Texas right now.
Yes, but it's a resurgence of self-reliance and a quest for a better future, I think. And it's just encouraging to see. And I hope more than 2.5 miles can be protected from this out-of-control border crisis. Well, Allie Bradley, I want to thank you, as always, for your excellent reporting. It's always so concise and useful, and we really appreciate it here. I know the country does, too. Thank you, Allie.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Always good to talk to you. Again, Allie Bradley over at NewsNation, and she's been doing she was an independent journalist before, but the cable net NewsNation hired her, brought her on, which was a very wise move to do, and she's just been a fantastic resource for genuine information about what's happening on the border. Blackout coverage, really, from so many other news outlets. Just a few reporters covering it with any seriousness. And Allie, I thought that was fascinating, especially the access to the boat ramp thing. I think we may, if what Allie is saying is true, and I believe her far more than I do so many of these lefty news outlets, if what she's saying is true, what that means is one of the core talking points that the left has been advancing now, ever since Texas tried to take control of its own destiny here on just 2.5 miles of border, is yet another lie from the left. If the Border Patrol has had access to that boat ramp into the Rio Grande the entire time, even the very predicate of Texas got in the way of people getting to rescue the family, all of that was a lie. We know so much of it was already, but even that, Border Patrol could have just taken the boat ramp if they had concerns and they knew about a drowning going on. It's amazing. It's amazing. They will not stop lying to you. They'll do it in the most brazen possible ways. A lot of chaos going on in the media now. Did you see that the Washington Post lost $100 million last year? How do you lose $100 million? How's it even possible? They did. They lost $100 million. It's owned by Jeffrey Bezos. Is his middle name P? I like saying that. Jeffrey P. Bezos. I don't know if it is. But they lost $100 million last year, according to the New York Times. It's all very incestuous. They all keep track of how much each other are losing. and they're losing a ton. And then we get this story today. The Sports Illustrated. Remember that? Sports Illustrated? It wasn't just the swimsuit edition. They had like a lot of magazines that covered, you guessed it, sports with photos. Sports Illustrated. They announced today they are laying off their entire staff. I guess technically it's the end of Sports Illustrated as we know it, for sure. And John Hassan, part of the great Hassan family, tweeted today a series of events over the past few years about Sports Illustrated. In 2019, the magazine was purchased, that is, for $110 million. In 2020, they claimed that they had doubled their earnings through licensing deals. In 2021, they decided to feature a trans model on the cover of the magazine, 2021. 2022, they start featuring obese models on the cover of their swimsuit edition. In 2023, they decide to go back to trans models. And in 2024, well, for some reason, the magazine failed. What happened? I can't imagine, after such a series of such great decisions, that a magazine would have to lay off its entire staff. Turns out there's not a market for fat trans swimsuit models. Who would have thunk? Coming up, the media, who are out of their minds, are concerned about losing all this money, so they have some advice for you. That's ahead. Hey, good afternoon to you. It is 3:35 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up on the show, we've got Todd Bensman joining us. We're going to talk to him at 4 o'clock about why Joe Biden may be in the midst of bribing the Mexican government right now. He's got some interesting details that you're going to want to hear. That's coming up at 4. And at 4:30, Margot Cleveland is here from The Federalist as we examine the Biden family art sale saga. She's got new details on that. Mary Margaret Olohan at the March for Life today, alongside tens of thousands, perhaps hundreds of thousands, marching to protect babies. And then Mike McCormick is here at 5:30, former stenographer for Joe Biden back in the day. He thinks the man should be impeached now. He's written a book about it. We'll talk to him. And you can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. I mentioned a moment ago that the Washington Post lost nearly $100 million last year. $100 million. The New York Times has this story up this week. Billionaires wanted to save the news industry. They're losing a fortune. What could have possibly led to that? How is it that these news outlets would be losing all that money? Well, it's a basic free market principle. If you're not producing a useful product, nobody's going to buy it. So there's that. There's that. And you have a ton of newspapers that are just losing all the money. And that's, that's places like the LA Times losing money, the New York Times, the Washington Post, and the list goes on and on. So in this write-up today, the New York Times assesses, they say Mr. Bezos hasn't fared much better than others, like the LA Times, at the Washington Post. Like many news organizations, the Post has struggled to hold on to the momentum that it had gained in the wake of the 2020 election. Of course, you'll remember that time period. That was when they were publishing left-wing fanfic. And as a result, picked up a bunch of left-wing readers who were trying to get their fix every day. Even they, apparently, have become exhausted by the Washington Post. Sagging subscriptions and advertising revenue led to losses of about $100 million last year. $100 million. At the end of the year, the company eliminated 240 of its 2,500 jobs through buyouts, including some of its well-regarded journalists, they say. Patty Stonisfer, who filled in as chief executive last year, called the buyouts difficult, but said they were necessary to invest in our top growth priorities. Employees at the Washington Post sent a letter in recent weeks to their top editor and their new permanent chief executive, expressing concern over the lack of research firepower for their articles in the wake of the buyouts. Oh, we don't have people to help us fact check. Well, that explains some Washington Post pieces of late. So here, that's the Post. So the Post is losing all this money. Now, is it a coincidence then that one of their top columnists, a guy by the name of Philip Bump, you may remember him from such hits as Hunter Biden did nothing wrong, and there's no evidence of Biden family guilt. These are actual things that he's said out loud. Philip Bump has written a column this week telling everyone that that they should stop reading anything else except for the Washington Post. The Washington Post, Philip Bump, has warned readers not to do their own research because trusting the authorities and the media is all you need to do. Now, has the recent past demonstrated that to you? Have you experienced life in America and thought to yourself, you know who I should really trust always, unconditionally? The government and the people who carry the water. That's who I should trust because that's going really, really well. It's not like we didn't have an entire pandemic where that was proven idiotic or anything. It's not like we constantly see, as it relates to Trump supporters or the man himself, a series of lies designed to only empower Democrats at the expense of the American people. It's not like we see that all the time. It's not like the media will fully invent tales of collusion with foreign governments on the part of their political opponents as a predicate to keep voters from electing them in the first place. It's not like that is going to happen, is it? So Philip Bump, headline, doing your own research is a good way to end up being wrong, says Philip Bump. Oh, this is Dan Goldman levels of patronizing. This is, you are too stupid to engage with the facts. Allow us to handle this. This is the Rachel Maddow school of thought. This is MSNBC's school of thought, right? The reason they don't show the Trump speech in Rachel Maddow's own assessment is because Trump may say something that is untrue, and we have an obligation as a news organization not to broadcast things that are untrue. Really? You do? Because up until this point, you have failed in that obligation, if that's the case. On any number of issues. Was Trump colluding with the Russians? No. Was Trump deserving of an FBI investigation designed to debilitate his presidency? No, he was not. Are American citizens who vote for Republicans domestic extremists? No, they're not. Was January 6th an insurrection? No, it wasn't. Is the economy actually doing great and that voters just don't realize it? No, it is not. That is a lie. Is our border just a challenge and not a crisis? No. How many lies are they going to tell us before we say, wait a second? Of course, most of us have already gotten to that point, but the idea that you would sit on television in prime time and be like, well, we have an obligation to tell the truth. We can't broadcast Trump. He may say something that's untrue. It's so ridiculous. You broadcast Biden speeches. I never see you once pause for that consideration. Biden lies as easily as he breathes. Doing your own research is a good way to end up being wrong, says Philip Bump. He writes, the internet has been a huge boon for the accessibility of information. There are few barriers, very few barriers, to consuming classic literature or detailed scientific analyses or catalogs of news reports. There's also an exorbitant amount of garbage information, of course, and an entire universe of people who say stuff that they think will get people to click links that will earn themselves money. Let me pause on this. Yeah, and they are called the mainstream corporate news media. What Philip Bump just described is the corporate media we have now. The people who will publish things that are designed to confirm left-wing biases and then fulfill their deepest, darkest fantasies about their political opponents on the right. This is what the corporate media do, what he's describing. So once again, this is a case of projection. While confidence in American institutions, he writes, has been in decline for some time, it's not hard to imagine how the economic incentives of the internet contribute. You can see where this is going. So now he's leapfrogging. He's saying the reason we don't trust our institutions as a people is because we're being misled by the non-corporate news outlets, by the non-left-wing news outlets. It's everybody else. It's not the Washington Post. The Washington Post is a place that you can reflexively believe. It's everybody else who's lying to you. And the reason things are so divided is because of all of those cruel liars out there. Rather than our institutions don't deserve trust because they constantly violate it, which is the truth. Mr. Bump says there's an outsized appetite for derogatory, counterintuitive, or anti-institutional assessments of the world around us. This is in part because alleged scandals are interesting, and in part because Americans like to view themselves as independent analysts of the world around us. Listen to the condescension here. How dare Americans think of themselves as independent thinkers. The result is that there is both a supply and a demand for nonsense or appealingly framed errors. Americans who have little trust in the system can easily find something to reinforce their skepticism. They often do. He then goes on, he says, this month, Neiman Labs' Josh Benton reported on research released last year that showed that people doing their own research on the internet often led them to gain more confidence in untrue information. The paper, titled Online Searches to Evaluate Misinformation, can increase its perceived veracity, and was written by researchers from the University of Central Florida, New York University, and Stanford. Their conclusions were straightforward. Although conventional wisdom suggests that searching online when evaluating misinformation would reduce belief in it, there's little empirical evidence to evaluate this claim, the authors wrote. Instead, they continued, we present consistent evidence that online search to evaluate the truthfulness of false news articles actually increases the probability of believing them. Okay, let's pause on this concept for a moment. How often have the media come out and made a claim that something was false that ended up, of course, being borne out as true by both the passage of time and the availability of authentic information? All the time. Was Jussie Smollett actually attacked by Trump supporters in the middle of a very cold Chicago night while he was carrying Subway, and they yelled out, "This is MAGA country"? No, that never happened. Were Haitian illegals whipped on our southern border? No, that never happened. Was a garage door pull actually a noose hanging inside of a NASCAR driver's garage? No, that never happened. That never happened. Did Michael Brown say, hands up, don't shoot? No, that never happened. That never happened. Did Nicholas Sandmann threaten a Native American man and taunt him and try to stand him down at the Lincoln Memorial? No, that never happened. Did Kyle Rittenhouse murder people in the streets of America in something that was not an act of self-defense? Did he cross state lines? No, and no. That never happened. That never happened. Did Donald Trump coordinate with the Russian government to undermine the election, to steal it? No, that never happened at all. Was there an insurrection on January 6th? Did armed people attempt to overthrow the United States government? No, that never happened. That's a lie. How many more of these do you need? Did the Russians blow up their own pipeline? Did the Russians blow up? No, that never happened. Did masks stop the transmission of COVID? No, that never happened. Did a jab that we call the vaccine actually prevent the transmission of COVID? No, that never happened. Is natural immunity useless in the face of COVID? No, it actually works. How many more lies do you need? Did social distancing do anything? No. Did putting plastic barriers up do anything? No. Was it required for us to wear masks on airplanes? No. It turns out the ventilation systems are fantastic. So actually, the body of evidence that's before us, the authentic body of evidence that's before us, is that the very news outlets who are saying, you better read us and nobody else, are the ones who lie to us the most with the most consequential results. So here you have a Washington Post columnist who refuses to admit there's even a semblance of evidence of Biden family guilt. He refuses to even pretend. He's like, he just won't even say it at all. And here he is saying, you've got to read the Washington Post. If you do your own research, you're in for it. I don't know. I don't think that's the case at all. In fact, I'm confident it's not the case. Look, I can say from my own experience, anytime I see like a Washington Post column like this, or any piece of news where I'm like, that looks interesting, even if it confirms my priors, meaning I kind of like what the Post is saying, what that item is saying, I dig more. Is it true? Should I get over my skis about this? Should I be enthusiastic about this particular piece of information? Is it false? Am I being misled here? That is a natural and obviously human reaction to it. If you had a kid who lied to you on a frequent basis, if one of your children had an integrity problem, what are the chances that you just constantly go on believing them reflexively? They're zero. If you're a parent with your head on your shoulders at all, you wouldn't. Sorry, you've lost. That's the whole point of the boy who cried wolf. It's like, sorry, you've lost my trust. I can't actually trust you reflexively. You're gonna have to prove it, young man. I'm tired of the lies, and as a result, our relationship's been affected by it. I can't trust you reflexively. Maybe you'll earn back that trust, but right now you don't have it. That's what you would do in a healthy relationship. And you would make that person better as a result. And so here in the case of the media, they lie to you over and over. What are you supposed to do? Just keep on believing? Oh, you're right. I'll just keep reading the Washington Post. You got to be the world's biggest sucker to fall for that crap. They just constantly mislead you, and then they're like, you know what, though? You can't read anywhere else. That's an abusive relationship. That's gaslighting is what it is. No, we're the only source of true and accurate information. I'm sorry, but you've lied to me a lot. No, I didn't. Or they just won't address it. They'll never correct it. So here you have a Washington Post columnist straight up saying, just read us. And it's pathetic. This is the most pathetic thing I've ever seen. They've lost $100 million last year because they're losing readers, they're losing revenue, and now you've got one of their columnists saying, please don't leave. We're the only people you can trust. It's embarrassing, actually. And I'm telling you, it's only going to get worse as we head into 2024, because the more panicky they get about losing the revenue and readership, the more censorial they're going to become. The more they're going to try and prevent you from reading alternative sources of information. And the big media companies do actually have a lot of leverage on that question. You might not realize this, but because of their relationships with the big tech companies, which are sincere, they really are close to them, they can manipulate the stats here. They can lean on the big tech companies and say, whoa, hey, you're letting a lot of misinformation through. We'd hate to have to call you out in our newspaper about all of this misinformation you're letting through. In other words, things that don't satisfy the left-wing agenda. And then places like Facebook and others who are concerned about being beaten over the head by these big media companies, okay, yeah, we'll clamp down on it. And so what they start doing is censoring all of this content, including and especially content that you might find relevant or important or interesting. And it's true. That is true, especially heading into this 2024 election. So the basis, the rationale for the election meddling machine is firing up again. It's a product of the 2016 election. The shock in the ruling class that Donald Trump won manifested itself in the most aggressive tyranny that any of us have seen in our lifetime. The end result of that was that the left decided to launch a full-blown censorship regime designed to clamp down on countervailing narratives, the types of things that hurt their ability to accrue power, to use the big tech companies to do it, to use government coercion to push it along. We saw that with the FBI, Elvis Chan, Twitter, Facebook, shutting down the Hunter Biden story. And their appetite for that type of censorship has only grown with every poll that demonstrates that Donald Trump is the leading candidate to return to the White House in 2024. In a moment, another news outlet is pulling the same stunt. So here you have the Washington Post saying, don't read anybody else. And next I've got NBC saying it's time to shut down any countervailing viewpoint. More on that ahead. Yeah, so NBC has a report up this week claiming that disinformation is an unprecedented threat to democracy in 2024, according to researchers, technologists, and political scientists. This is that Harvard mentality. Harvard keeps churning out all of this left-wing nonsense. And, of course, tyranny is now a feature of the left, always has been. And boy, is it on display right now. They want to censor everything. Don't let them. Keep speaking the truth, baby. Coming up, we're going to be joined by Todd Bensman. We'll talk to him about the state of our border and the bribes Biden appears to be paying to Mexico.